Hi, I'm Mary Louise Kelly, co-host of All Things Considered. I'll be in Oklahoma City on November 4th at Oklahoma City Community College. Tickets are going fast. If you would like to join me for an evening of conversation and stories from the front lines of the news, you'll find tickets and more information at kosu.org/tickets. That's kosu.org/tickets. Can't wait to see you there.
Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by the Black Church Traditions and African American Faith Life program at Phillips Seminary, offering a master's degree in social justice online and in person. Learn more at wherefaithleads.com.
This is Focus Black Oklahoma. I'm Jacob Littlebear. As the world celebrates a new ceasefire agreement in Gaza, other conflicts continue to rage across the globe, including in Sudan. In January, then Secretary of State Antony Blinken declared the Sudanese military and allied militias were committing genocide. What does this have to do with Oklahoma? Here's FBO's Nick Alexandrov.
My name is Viola Ford Fletcher.
My name is Nimat Ahmadi.
Half a world apart, across a century, their stories echo.
On May 31st in 21, I went to bed in my family's home in Greenwood, the neighborhood of Tulsa.
I'm originally from Darfur.
My family had a beautiful home. We had great neighbors and I had friends to play with. I felt safe.
What I remember is that how peaceful was life. I see our people working hard to do it for themselves.
In a few hours, all of that was gone.
All of a sudden, this attack erupted.
I still see black men being shot, black bodies lying in the street.
Militias and Sudan armed forces attacking villagers.
I still smell smoke and see fire.
Killing people.
I hear the screams.
Everything we have built has been destroyed in an overnight.
I have lived through the massacre every day.
It's the horror that I will never wish to anyone, even on my enemies.
20 years ago, before Nimat Ahmadi fled to the U.S., before she founded the Darfur Women Action Group, she lived in Sudan. Her homeland at that time was on
the edge of a precipice. More than 300,000 people are dead.
5 a.m, the armed militiamen come in on camelback and horseback, and they start burning.
His name is on school books found in the ashes of his home.
Today, ashes still drift across western Sudan, over refugee camps, over the grounds where villages stood, fires lit by the same forces. The country has endured decades of crisis, displacement, famine, genocide, each unfolding almost unseen.
The same indigenous African tribes that were targeted 20 years ago are currently under attack. The same group have been systematically and deliberately targeted.
But there's a difference now. The aggressors then had minimal means.
The armed militiamen come in on camelback and horseback.
Now they have more sophisticated weapons, including drones, like more advanced weapon technology. They have these devices that track people from miles and miles away.
They have vehicles to speed across those distances.
And have the money and also support from the richest players in the region, such as United Arab Emirates.
The United Arab Emirates, the UAE. That's where Oklahoma enters the story. We can trace the weapons back from the desert, over the ocean, back to the plains.
Here are 2 good reasons to see your Toyota dealer.
Imagine you run a Toyota lot. Last year, business was slow. You sold 52 cars. This year, 605 in 6 months, a 1,000% jump. And 3 out of 4 went to one buyer. That's what Oklahoma's arms trade looks like this year. Sales spiked from $14 million to $164 million, and most of the weapons went to a single customer, the UAE. The same country Nimat just mentioned, the one now arming, now fueling the war in Darfur.
We have clear examples of the UAE funneling weapons to the RSF.
Or the Rapid Support Forces, a key actor in Sudan's conflict. You're listening to Hussam Majoub.
They are supplying the RSF with arms. The Rapid Support Forces leadership uses the UAE as a logistical hub for finance, for their financial transactions.
Armed and funded.
The RSF is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity and atrocities in Sudan.
In January, the U.S. State Department reviewed this record of violence. It charged the RSF with genocide. Hussam was born in Sudan, but now lives in Texas. He co-founded Sudan Bukra, an independent TV channel watched by millions of Sudanese. After the Khartoum massacre in June 2019, when more than 100 pro-democracy protesters were killed, authorities shut down the international outlets, CNN, Al Jazeera.
People relied on Sudan Bukra for the next 6 weeks as the only channel still broadcasting from Sudan and not affiliated with the regime. It was a tool of organizing people for the mass demonstrations of June 30th, which literally changed the balance of power between the civilians and the military.
6 years later, the RSF paramilitaries, backed by the UAE, are ascendant in Western Sudan.
As we speak now, Rapid Support Forces is controlling most of Darfur except for Al Fashir, the largest city in Darfur. The Rapid Support Forces is putting Al Fashir under siege for more than a year now, and this is causing a huge humanitarian crisis there.
9 miles south of Al Fashir, one site offered refuge, if just for a time. A Sudanese camp called Zamzam in North Darfur, a camp for displaced people, home to hundreds of thousands, an RSF target.
It felt like they wanted to remove us because of who we are.
In April, the RSF rode in shouting racist slurs, self-appointed executioners shooting on sight. The UN estimates they murdered between 300 and 1,500 people.
They were chanting as they killed people in their homes. It is behavior you wouldn't even find in the wilderness.
More than 400,000, 4 of every 5 in the camp, fled after the slaughter, fled to escape the RSF. They had to run again. You can look up Oklahoma's weapons sales yourself on USA Trade Online, the U.S. Census Bureau's trade portal. It offers different data sets. One of them is
State Exports by HS Commodities.
HS Commodities are trade items grouped by
the Harmonized System,
which assigns each a number. The longer the number, the more specific the item. So,
HS Code 93
is arms and ammunition, and
HS Code 9306
covers munitions, bombs, grenades, torpedoes, mines, missiles, and other ammunition, projectiles, and parts thereof. Oklahoma's weapons exports to the UAE, sent in June, fall in that latter category.
HS Code 9306.90.
They're the other, and that's all we can infer. You hit a barrier quickly and see it's opaque. Beyond it, weapons are built and sold in silence. We don't know what these weapons are, who makes them, or where. We only know their cost, their weight. $133 million, 31 metric tons. Oklahoma pays for this. When you pay your taxes, you're helping maintain, helping to upgrade the places that make and move weapons, instruments of war. Places like Tinker Air Force Base or the McAllister Army Ammunition Plant. But it's not clear what you pay. It's not clear how much of the money you hand over every April, how much of that the state then takes and channels toward these sites. Another barrier, opaque again. I searched. I found a couple line items. $198,000 approved for Tinker's eastward expansion, a request roughly $125,000 for rail access work at McAllister. I kept looking. I found something bigger, a $9 million tax break for the aerospace sector. Money that could cover teachers' salaries, library hours, school renovations, road and bridge upgrades, or other forms of repair. Viola Ford Fletcher, the Tulsa Race Massacre survivor, knows what was stolen.
I have never made much money in my country. State and city took a lot from me.
She knows the pain of memory.
I have lived through the massacre every day.
In Darfur, millions targeted with foreign weapons live a similar pain and wake to it still. For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Nick Alexandrov.
As federal budget cuts to healthcare and education take hold, more families in the United States will have to make difficult choices. In Oklahoma, the disparities are evident for students with special needs and people with multiple sclerosis. Zaakirah Muhammad has the story.
In Oklahoma, two urgent issues collide: the future of special education in both public and private school systems, and the hidden toll of the Big Beautiful Bill's federal cuts on chronic illnesses, such as multiple sclerosis. The Big Beautiful Bill, otherwise known as OBBBA, was signed into law by President Donald J. Trump on July 4, 2025. Over time, it would strip away funding for programs like Medicare and Medicaid for medicine and doctor copays that are often financially out of reach for most people. Oklahoma State House Bill 2247, effective November 2025, introduced a new law requiring the state education department to develop clear standards for inclusive education for special needs students. State Representative John Waldron of Oklahoma District 77 is a former social studies teacher who spent 20 years at Tulsa's Booker T. Washington High School and is the current chairman of the Oklahoma Democratic Party. He is working to reshape how the state approaches special education in the ongoing debate about inclusive education and student rights by implementing least restrictive environments, or LREs.
I ran a bill last year that would have posted the federal requirements on the state website to establish that the standard for special education is to put students in least restrictive environments. That means if they need accommodations, they should receive those accommodations, but they should also have the freedom to participate just as any other student to the greatest extent possible. So the gold standard would be for the students to have something like 80% of their time in the classroom with other students, and maybe they get pulled out for special activities, or maybe they have supports in the classroom. But the concept of least restrictive environment is that you want to give the students the fewest and most appropriate interventions to guarantee their success in the classroom.
This approach represents a shift from practices that often isolate students with special needs. Recent policy changes and budget cuts have raised concerns about the future of special education in Oklahoma, and critically, cuts to the Federal Department of Education threaten oversight of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. This is alarming in a state with over 17% of students requiring special education services, such as individualized education plans or IEPs. Representative Waldron shared classroom statistics as an indicator of where families tend to place their trust.
Right now, there are 20 public school kids for every private school kid. But when it comes to kids with individual education plans, the ratio is 36-1. Parents are choosing the public schools at a much higher rate than the private schools. So if we underfund the public schools and we undercut special education needs, that's a large population of kids that are going to be affected by the changes we're making. I think every kid is of value. I think every kid is worth educating. And if we start to leave some kids behind because we think it's too difficult, we're really doing a disservice to the future of Oklahoma.
Oklahoma State House Bill 2247 is an initiative aimed at ensuring public schools uphold federal standards under IDEA, requiring specific accommodations and qualified special education staff. The Lindsay Nicole Henry Scholarship, established in 2010, provides tuition support for students with disabilities so they can attend private schools instead of public schools. However, families who use private school vouchers under the program give up certain IDEA protections, something Waldron says many don't realize, which then raises concerns about accountability.
When you take the Lindsay Nicole Henry tuition credit, you waive your rights under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So you have the case of kids who are being sent to very expensive private schools that are not required by law to meet federal standards. And furthermore, the thing I want to differentiate is that bills like 2247 about public schools maintain that gold standard of what's recognized as best for students. We're starting to develop an attitude in the legislature that says that kids with special learning needs need to be separated from the population. They need to be protected because they might, face bullying or discrimination or something. And the only way to educate those kids is to put them in protected environments in private schools. Now, I attended a private school, and I can tell you that bullying goes on there just as easily as in a public school. But what the difference is accountability. Public schools have to be accountable. And if we're throwing a lot of public dollars into private schools without requiring standards of accountability and transparency, we are setting up a situation where the parents of children with individual education plans are going to experience a lot of frustration because they're spending a lot of taxpayer dollars, but they're not getting the results that a public school would deliver.
While classrooms face one kind of inequity, healthcare presents another. Multiple sclerosis, or MS, disproportionately affects women. According to the National MS Society, it is 3 times more common in women than men and affects 3 out of 1,000 Black people. Alana Mbanza is the founder and CEO of Empower MS, a wellness company dedicated to supporting women living with multiple sclerosis. Mbanza is a Black woman who was a career and college educator for over a decade. She shares firsthand experience with MS and the many obstacles she faced in receiving a proper diagnosis.
So, multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease. It's essentially the body's immune system starts attacking itself. It is a debilitating and progressive disease. And because it's attacking those major systems, the symptoms can vary from person to person. That's why they call it the snowflake disease, because no 2 people with MS have the same exact symptoms and progression. I was diagnosed in 2019. However, I had been trying to figure out what was going on with me for 5 years prior to that. So I was having all of these different symptoms, and my doctors kept sending me to all of these different specialists. And unfortunately, the doctors that I had at the time, they weren't kind of putting those pieces of the puzzle together. They were looking at those symptoms in isolation. And it wasn't until I started going numb in my legs and eventually my entire lower body was numb that I ended up in the emergency room. And even when I went to the emergency room, the doctor there did not want to give me the test that I needed. And I had to advocate, I had to threaten legal action to get an MRI.
That scan finally revealed what years of disconnected medical visits had missed. Multiple lesions on both her brain and spine, explaining the progressive numbness and mobility issues she had been experiencing. Throughout her work with Empower MS, Mbanza has interviewed women across the country, revealing a healthcare system with disparities. Many women shared stories of delayed diagnosis and medical gaslighting and the misconception that MS is a, quote, white person disease, unquote. While Mbanza eventually found a second opinion and her sense of community, it didn't stop there. Next came the cost of survivorship, medicines, and access to specialists.
The medication that I'm on right now costs $75,000 a month, and the infusion that I was on prior to that was $100,000 per infusion. When you think about like mobility aids or adaptive tools just for us to live our lives, specialist visits, like all of these things add up. And neurologists are the ones who kind of have the knowledge and the expertise to treat MS, and there are MS specialists as well. But unfortunately, neurologists aren't in every community. They are concentrated in certain areas, and access to them is challenging for a lot of folks.
For Representative John Waldron, protecting public schools means ensuring that no child is left behind. For Alana Ebanza, it means raising the education bar to ensure communities of color are listened to the first time. Additionally, she has a call to action when it comes to healthcare funding cuts.
The reason for the cuts is that they are trying to balance budgets. And in my personal opinion, that should never come at the cost of people's lives. And sometimes when I hear government say we're trying to balance budgets, I'm like, but do you know there are like women who aren't working, who are still making work for their families? And so I really just urge them to reprioritize the funding that they are giving out. If we can find billions of dollars for certain prioritized, surely we can invest in the health and dignity of vulnerable populations. And it's healthcare is not a luxury, it's a right, and it should be easily and readily accessible to people.
To learn more about Empower MS, visit www.empowerms.co. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Zaakirah Muhammad, Indiana Beach, Kenya.
Since the passage of Oklahoma House Bill 1775 in 2021, educators and librarians have had to carefully navigate book offerings in classes and libraries. While legal challenges to the law persist, students of all ages risk missing out on learning opportunities that are only available in some banned books. Jess Grimes has more.
Cisneros says, I found something positive, my own voice. It's such a hallmark of the writer's journey, of this search for the self. And I think if we keep searching, we will find literary brethren, brothers, and sisters.
This quote, read by Dr. Jessica Doe, an Indigenous poet, is from the foreword of Mexican-American writer and educator Sondra Cisneros' book, The House on Mango Street. Published in 1983, this coming-of-age story follows a young Hispanic girl named Esperanza as she slowly grows into adolescence and matures in the Hispanic quarter of Chicago. The story of Esperanza is told through a series of vignettes, which are brief lyrical depictions of scenes that focus on a particular setting, character, or moment. This allows the book to be suitable for all ages, leaving it to be enjoyable for young readers, while also being accessible to teens and young adults. According to the New York Times, most of the vignettes in the book were inspired by Cisneros' time teaching at Chicago's Latino Youth Alternative High School. She made sure to listen and include the voices of students that went unheard. Students who were former dropouts, queer, addicted to drugs, some that were children raising babies, some who couldn't walk outdoors without being targeted by gangs, and some who were targeted by abusive boyfriends or parents. This was their reality, a reality that she was able to make accessible and digestible to young readers who would one day grow to gradually understand the bigger picture. Here is Kira Renteria, a Tulsa Community College undergraduate student, sharing her experiences with finding things she can relate to in the book.
She starts around, in the beginning, she talks about how she, moved a lot and how she hadn't, found the home necessarily until she went on Mango Street, and that was, the house we finally owned. So when I was younger, my parents and I and my family, we would move about the apartment after apartment after apartment. So I could relate to her in that sense that we finally found, a place to stay. And as well as this, sense that this isn't my only place, This home that I found, this isn't, I want to... She talks about how she wants to move out of Mango Street and she wants to go out and see other things that are not just that little street. Apart from that, in her school, she finds a bit of shame in her poverty. And I think that's definitely something we can really relate to. That sometimes it's a little bit embarrassing.
Recently, Kira learned that she would have the opportunity to meet her grandmother for the first time, since her grandmother was able to obtain a U.S. visa. This is exciting news for the family since Kira's mom has not been able to see her mother in over 20 years. The aspect and effect of familial separation across borders can often go overlooked in mainstream media.
Kind of like, for my mom, for example, she doesn't speak English, she only speaks Spanish. And it kind of, like, because La Mamacita, for example, obviously wasn't explicitly said, but it seems like she didn't want to be there, she wanted to go back home. And I think that's definitely relatable in the sense that, a lot of Hispanic communities, they want to go back to their home, want to see they've had a family, but some of them just can't.
Despite some students being able to see themselves within these pages, The House on Mango Street was one of 676 books deemed inappropriate and requested to be removed from library bookshelves in a Southern Texas school district in the summer of 2024. According to a Texas Tribune article, the email sent to the district, quote, cited Texas state law, House Bill 900, which requires vendors to rate their books and materials for appropriateness based on the presence of sex depictions or references before selling them to school libraries, end quote. The vignette, titled Red Clowns, depicted a rape where Esperanza felt vulnerable, betrayed, and lied to. For deeper and more mature topics like this, Cisneros made sure to write in a way that wasn't elusive and could be suitable for young readers. Despite this section was one of the most controversial in the book, leading to its constant challenges. Tulsa Public Schools librarian Willow Hoxie shared insight about the process of removing books.
So every librarian and every library has a formal challenge procedure. So for my library, there is a challenge committee. So if there is an official challenge, then whoever is challenging the book, they have to fill out a form, they have to have read the book, they have to tell us what is objectionable, and then it goes to a neutral committee of librarians, administrators, and community members, and students. And they all also read the book and decide whether or not the claims have merit and whether or not it will remain in the library, whether it will potentially be moved. Like if it's in an elementary school library, sometimes those get moved up to like middle to high school, etc.
For millennia, stories have been used as a way of preservation. When books are banned, that preservation can be erased. Making texts like these less available to students removes certain voices, limits them to one perspective, and hinders opportunity for connection. Reading is the gateway to understanding, and understanding is the gateway to community. When the power of reading is lost, so is the power of community. Here again is Willow Hoxie.
I think that by losing access to these texts, it limits what people are allowed to experience. We can only know so much through our own experience. That's part of why we read. We read to learn about how other people think, how other people feel. And whenever this book, which speaks so deeply to the experience of very specifically an impoverished young Hispanic woman, is removed from that conversation, I think that we lose a lot.
Sandra Cisneros herself has been on the mission to make sure these books are heard. She has made it a goal to read and share these 676 books that have been targeted. Some of these titles include Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe, The Bluest Eyes by Toni Morrison, Flamer by Mark Corrado, and many others. Here's Dr. Doe.
When you can't share story, especially in your language, then there is no way to preserve it. When a reader who might see themselves in the narrator of Mango Street or any so-called marginalized person, when they see a book like that being banned, what they're going to internalize is shame. So that's what they are going to learn from book banning. If someone from the dominant culture sees that book being banned, then they are going to internalize hierarchy, racism, colonization. So it's going to be that cycle continuing.
Ultimately, the 676 books that were put under review by the district were not removed. The district realized that some of the books on the list were not labeled as sexually explicit. This means that the request did not fit the criteria for Texas State Law 900. In this case, requests that did not fit the criteria could only be challenged by parents, students 18 years or older, and an employee or resident of the school district, according to the Texas Tribune. Although the books were not removed for that specific district, books like The House on Mango Street and others listed recently faced constant challenges, some that succeeded in removal, limiting accessibility to texts that can be life-altering for some readers and eye-opening to others. In the New York Times article, Cisneros said, quote, "I believe in the power of stories to restore us. I trust that if we approach one another with deep respect and deep listening, love will heal what divides us." End quote. Dr. Doe adds,
When we talk about books, they involve history, and all histories unfortunately carry harm and violence. And I think it's important to remember that violence doesn't begin or end on the page. In any story, in any book, it's going to be a snippet of a history, whether it's real or imagined, fiction, nonfiction. I also try to teach through Indigenous methodologies, even if I'm not teaching necessarily Indigenous text. That comes with often relational accountability, trying to see how we as readers might fit into this story, how we might fit our lens onto it. You know, stories for Indigenous people, whether oral or written, have always been medicine. And medicine heals, but it can also burn and sting.
The poet Joy Harjo has said that books are medicine. If so, libraries are pharmacies with a prescription out there for every human. Parents have the right to supervise what their children read. But might they also consider that the book they regard as harmful for their own child may be the perfect remedy for another? For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Jess Grimes in Tulsa.
You're listening to Focus Black Oklahoma. What began as a town hall for Enid's Hispanic community turned into a cross-cultural summit, bringing together neighbors from all backgrounds to tackle shared struggles and build unity. Here's Venson Fields with details.
On Friday, October 10th, what was billed as the Culture Connection Summit took place in Enid. The idea for the summit began within the Garfield County Hispanic Coalition, sparked by growing concerns amid the rising discrimination, racism, and fear impacting the Hispanic community. As discussions were held, it became clear that many of the same issues, such as housing insecurity, food insecurity, racial profiling, healthcare access, and other social determinants of health, were affecting other marginalized communities. There was a realization that bias, prejudice, and discrimination exists between ethnic groups, contributing to a disconnect between communities. Communities dealing with the same social issues on their own, when, with a little understanding, could benefit from working together. What began as a Hispanic-focused town hall evolved into a more multicultural collaboration designed to bring diverse communities together, combining shared dialogue, building solidarity, and how to work collectively toward positive solutions. One of the initial organizers of the summit was Raquel Gramillo, who is a practice administrator with a federally qualified health center, or FQHC for short. Gramillo explained how it all started.
So I was very involved in helping the summit come about. So it all started with the Garfield County Hispanic Coalition and being a part of a lot of conversations that I was having there and with other minority groups in our community. So with Micronesians, the Black community, Native Americans. And we realized that a lot of what the Hispanic community was experiencing was also going on with our other cultural groups. So our hope is that together we're stronger and we can address these needs, but also come together with our strengths to build stronger communities in Enid.
Stacy Norwood, the executive director of Westside Ministries, and Chuck Kearney, a small business specialist with the Autry Technology Center, were contacted to represent the Black community and shared how they became involved with the summit. Here's Stacy Norwood.
I first heard about it from my sister, who is always into something and doing something around the community. And she asked me, said there's an opportunity. The initial reason was more or later trying to make sure, and they would love to make it an annual event, to get the different cultures around here, predominant cultures, from African-American to Caucasian to Native American to Hispanic, as well as Marshallese, some of these main cultural groups, and start working together and sharing that diversity. If we can share the diversity, we can learn more and work better together.
Chuck Kearney explains his interest in the summit.
I believe I received an email asking if I would volunteer to be on the board from Dan Shadell, which he is over the United Way Foundation.
Dan Shadell is the chief executive officer of the United Way of Northwest Oklahoma, who was also named as being instrumental in organizing the summit.
Well, I got involved by, like I said, receiving the email and then just showing up We had sometimes we would have in-person meetings. And what was so neat about it is that we kind of know each other, but just to be more familiar with each other's culture, we would bring a dish from for example, the Native American, Donnie Childs, he brought a dish that was a part of his culture. And, we would feast off of it. When it was our turn to bring a dish, my mother did some fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, and some greens. And we even had some red Kool-Aid. So that was really neat. So we would meet so often and we would discuss on what we wanted this to look like. And because there were so many different ideas and everything, we even had a facilitator come in and facilitate so that we can stay focused.
The Culture Connection Summit began with the doors opening at 8 a.m. with a meet and greet continental breakfast. There were tables set up throughout the space and front row seating near the stage. Shortly after, approximately 30 young people from the CDSA Youth Build program and their program director, Brandy Stewart, filed in and took their seats in the front rows. At 9 a.m., J.C. Watts, the first keynote speaker, took the podium. He is a former OU quarterback, a former U.S. congressman, and a former youth pastor. Watts shared some humorous anecdotes about growing up in Oklahoma, how the generosity of a white local businessman got him and a friend a summer job, and how, as a youth minister, his portrayal of a black Santa Claus caused much introspection in the predominantly white congregation. It didn't seem like a big deal to him as all his Santas had been black. At 10 a.m., the cultural presentations took place. The Marshallese, Black, Hispanic, and Native American communities each gave a presentation representative of their community and heritage. Lunch was served at noon, and as previously mentioned, each community was represented regarding the menu: pineapple pork, squash, mac and cheese, sweet potato pie, and flan. After lunch, the second keynote speaker, Amanda Sandoval, took the podium. She is the first female Hispanic mayor of the city of Bethany. Sandoval explained how she heard about the summit and why she decided to get involved.
Raquel Jaramillo reached out to me several months ago asking for my input. We had connected through a mutual friend of ours, Jessica Ramirez. And so she told me a little bit of what this culture summit was going to be about. And it was something really up my alley, something that really I'm gravitated towards. I think it's a good opportunity for a lot of collaborating and open-mindedness and being able to be exposed to different lived experiences. And it starts with conversations with people that don't live like you, people don't think like you, and people that have different lived experiences.
Sandoval also explained some of the challenges she's faced as mayor.
It's everything I basically had prepped for and very excited for. The biggest challenge is a sense of impotency when people come up to me with issues that I cannot solve because it's outside of my jurisdiction. So not being able to help them, but the way I'm able to remediate that is by connecting them with the shareholders that are able to help them, whether that's states legislators or even the federal government, like the postmaster, for example.
At 1 p.m., the summit was then divided into 4 groups with discussions on 4 topics deemed critical to each community: community and culture, government, healthcare, and housing. An hour was provided for each discussion by associates from Audrey Technology Center. Problems for each topic were identified, and then potential solutions were offered. Then at the allotted time, presentations were given by each group to the entire summit. The summit then ended with closing remarks. Overall, the Culture Connection Summit was well received, and each of the organizers have hopes of carrying forward what was learned for future events and collaborations. Again, here's Raquel Jaramillo.
I would just like to mention that I've learned a lot from this experience. I'm a millennial, so a lot of the people in our committee group are an older, more mature generation. There's a sense of community that we are missing in my generation, and a sense of involvement that we're missing. So my hope is that the newer generations can set a good example, just like the older generation did for me during this whole planning process.
For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Venson Fields in Enid.
Would you like to pitch a story to FBO or work with us as a correspondent? Please email us at contact@focusblackoklahoma.com or call 918-807-3886. Nestled in the Brookside neighborhood of Tulsa is a garden that's not just for growing herbs and vegetables, but for cultivating Indigenous knowledge, wellness, and community. A nonprofit called Cedar Sovereign Wellness aims to provide resources to tribal citizens living in an urban environment to promote health and cultural connection with an emphasis on growing and cooking food. Nico Berlin has details.
Cedar Sovereign Wellness occupies a single family-style home on the corner of 49th and Peoria. It's a nonprofit organization teaching Native American ancestral foodways through cooking workshops, gardening, and community events. Nico Albert Williams founded Cedar in 2022, eventually opening the community center in the fall of 2023.
The vibe that we have tried to create is that you're coming over to your favorite auntie's house and you're at home here. You're not going to have to come here and justify your membership in the Native community. You can relax and let your guard down. And when you can do that, then that's when you can truly learn and connect with other people.
Most of Cedar's events and programs are reserved for Indigenous relatives, who are people identifying with a Native American tribe. But Cedar still engages with allies practicing Indigenous agricultural and food values. Each month, Nico leads a group through the Tulsa Farmers Market to teach people how to use it as their grocery store.
I know so many people that go to the farmer's market, get overwhelmed, see all of this food, buy a bunch of greens that looked beautiful, and then get home and don't know what to do with it, and it ends up going bad.
Nico and Cedar board member Taryn Evans wheeled an empty cart through the market loop. Here's Nico.
What we usually do is we shop the market, get all of our ingredients, get inspired by what seasonally is available at the market. And then the following day, we have our soup group. That's where creativity and skill come in. You gotta learn how to have some base recipes that you can plug different seasonal fresh things into.
Nico leads soup group every 2 weeks. It's a gathering at Cedar where she demonstrates recipes using her professional culinary skills. Chicken pozole verde was the meal for that weekend.
So chard was definitely on my list for the pozole. So this is gorgeous. You can just saute this up, even cut up this whole thing. This whole stems are really tender and the whole thing is delicious. So far, I'm striking out on tomatillos. It might be too early for those, and that's okay. The land tells you what you're going to eat. It's backwards. You're not saying these are the things that I need. Instead, the land is saying these are the things that you have. A lot of us, folks my age in our 40s, those lifestyle changes are really hard to make. The future of the health and wellness of our people, it's with the kids.
Nico has volunteered at Tulsa Indian Education's K-12 summer camp for over half a decade. She started after meeting Aaron Parker, a resource advisor for Indian Education. Aaron says the camp relies on community partners like Cedar.
We now have a relationship where I just give her the dates and she's like, I'm there.
The summer camp is open to K-12 Native students in Tulsa public schools. Nico uses food to tell them cultural stories and the history of Indigenous peoples in the United States. Watermelon pizza is a popular recipe among the students. Here again is Nico, then Aaron.
I have specific stories that go with it. I like to incorporate traditional storytelling, and the story of the first strawberry works perfectly with that because we use all these different berries as toppings, and there's all these different berries in that story.
I just feel like it's fun right now. Of course, it's fun to cook and mess with things and chop things. But at the same time, they're learning culture without even sometimes knowing. When they get home, I feel like even my own son, he knows, he'll be like, I can't get him to eat anything. But because Chef Nico made it, he's like, oh yeah, I want some yogurt with mint in it. And you're like, what?
Aaron encourages students who enjoy Nico's lessons to attend Cedar's events and cooking workshops. Soup Group offers a similar learning environment where participants can ask Nico questions about the recipe and its ingredients.
I'm like no chef by any means. Like I can cook a few very basic things, but like I don't know how to make any traditional foods. Like she makes it easy and like accessible, you know.
That's Courtney Natsway, a citizen of the Muskogee Nation living in Tulsa who attended Soup Group.
When you get out into the smaller towns and their reservation, like they're just a lot closer and a lot more like in touch still with that traditional knowledge. Whereas when you get into Tulsa, like we're a lot more disconnected from that, you know. So I love that Burning Cedar exists for like us urban natives gather, and we don't have to drive out to Okmulgee to like eat these foods or experience this thing.
Courtney manages the College of the Muskogee Nation's gardens in Okmulgee. She partners with Burning Cedar as the manager for its Sovereign Seeds Garden Collective. The program is in its first year, supporting at-home cultivation of plants with tribal origins. Courtney delivers seeds and gardening supplies while acting as an outlet of advice to the program's participants.
We acquired all those food sovereignty seeds, and some of them are from like 2014 or older. And it just makes me sad to think about these old traditional seeds just sitting there. So they don't want to be sitting in a closet in the dark, you know?
Courtney says urban gardeners often have to work around soil contamination, space limitations, and few pollinators. Burning Cedar supports these gardeners to reclaim traditional foodways and diets in a civic environment that discourages them. Here's Nico.
The actual access to land is the biggest barrier because a lot of us have to live in apartments. A lot of us rent and don't have the freedom to do whatever they want with their yard. That's the challenge in the urban space, is that we are living within this dominant culture that doesn't reflect our values as Indigenous people.
Ducks lay eggs in Burning Cedar's backyard garden space. Native pollinator species and grasses flourish around them. Nico says you can feel the difference between their yard and cookie-cutter lawns.
I hope that we're modeling that in a way that future generations wouldn't want it any other way.
Burning Cedar is open between noon and 5 p.m. each day from Tuesday to Saturday. Events like Farmers Market Meetup and Soup Group can be found on their Facebook page and website at burningscedar.org. Each event lists whether or not it is reserved for Indigenous relatives. For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Nico Berlin in Okmulgee.
Thanks for joining us on Focus Black Oklahoma. Here's FBO's Sondra Slade with a friendly reminder that sometimes driving on Oklahoma roads requires the heart of a lion.
I love The Wiz. Sometimes when I'm in a creative funk, I get out my VHS tape. Yes, I still have a VCR. I fast forward to the singing parts and have a party right in my living room. The funny thing about that, though, is I hate musicals. But this was a film that I saw as a child, and it holds a place in my heart. I laugh at them walking and skipping down the yellow brick road, trying to imitate them almost falling over, knowing good and well my insurance is not set up for that. When I think of a place, I think of that place. But driving for storytelling, comedy, and other events makes me look at roads much deeper and closer. At one point, I was in Arkansas nearly every other week for a couple of months. Whether it was Bentonville, Springdale, Lau, or Little Rock, I was driving. The thing I noticed the most was how easy the streets were. True, they had almost the same amount of cones as Tulsa, but their streets were so smooth. I always heard the stories about how different Arkansas was from Tulsa, whether it be food, law enforcement, or even the amount of festivals. But one thing I noticed is that even though they got the same amount of weather, if not more, their streets weren't like ours. Taking a ride down certain Tulsa streets is like a return to the cobblestones, where you would be better off on a horse than in something with horsepower. When I have to drive, I feel like my front-wheel drive car is on the old Zingo roller coaster that used to be at the Tulsa Fair. But at least on that ride, I knew there would be an end. Sometimes I feel like Oklahoma shouldn't be allowed to sell anything but all-wheel drive cars. When I pull up to an area where they are doing construction, I see maybe 3 to 4 guys working and just 2 standing there. It makes me mad. Then I start thinking that we have ADHD in projects. Like, if we just finished one thing all the way completed, it would instill hope. I remember as a kid just wondering where exactly was the Wiz and this yellow brick road supposed to be. So I decided it was time to examine the Wiz more closely. As I watched the Wiz, it seemed to me that it was supposed to be in New York. Well, I've been to New York several times, and the yellow bricks I've seen there, let's just say I have not even wanted to step on them. Looking at the streets in Tulsa, I noticed Reconciliation Way ends in the baseball field where we know Black people were buried during the massacre. And the other end is the jail, David L. Moss. Is that really reconciliation? I've also noticed that every street named after a Black man is in a dead end. Was this on purpose or never mind, I don't want to go there. One day, I was all ready to go to Whataburger and get me a kid's meal. I could just taste the salt on those fries and the grease dripping from that burger. As I was singing along to You Send Me Swinging by Mint Condition, thinking of the kind of cheese and other items I would add, I hit a pothole so big, I ended up in Popeye's parking lot off of Pine. I just sat there for a moment. Then I got out to make sure that my car was okay, because I knew I would have a busted tire or my bumper off. Luckily, it was all intact. I was so upset, I just went in, ordered some chicken. So I guess a pothole made me change my mind. Easing on down the road may not be that easy if you're traveling on these Tulsa streets.
Focus, Black Oklahoma is produced in partnership with KOSU Radio and Tri-City Collective. Additional support is provided by the Commemoration Fund and Press Forward. Our theme music is by Moffett Music.
Focus, Black Oklahoma's executive producers are Quresh Ali Lansana and Bracken Clark. Our associate producers are Jesse Ulrich and Naomi Agnew. Our production interns are Alexander Evans, Jess Grimes, Roma Carter, and Anna Wilson.
You can visit us online at kosu.org or focusblackoklahoma.com and on YouTube at Tri-City Collective OK. You can follow us on Instagram at focusblackok and on Facebook at facebook.com/focusblackok.com. You can hear Focus Black Oklahoma on demand at kosu.org, the NPR app, npr.org, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know KOSU accepts vehicles as a form of support? You get a tax deduction, and we'll take care of the rest. Visit kosu.org or call 855-277-2346.
Oklahoma City is pretty big. Take it from Mayor David Holt.
The city limits of Oklahoma City clock in at 620 square miles. That means we are the size of 8 Cleveland, Ohios. Washington, D.C., yeah, we could take 10 of those. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we're 11 Pittsburghs.
Luckily, KOSU's OKC Guide is here to break it all down, district by district. Head to kosu.org/OKC Guide to check it out.